Peter goes on and he says, "But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up." You see, the Bible says there's going to be a final judgment by fire, not by water next time, but by fire. But as you think about it, what the scoffers are doing today is that they're rejecting that judgment by fire. They're rejecting that final C there, the seventh C, consummation. One of the secularists writes this: "In this case, the universe continues expanding forever. However, in the course of time, galaxies move far away from each other, stars stop burning, the inhabitants of an open universe die in the solitude of cold, empty space." It's interesting. The evolutionists start with a big bang, right, and end with a big freeze. Well, the Bible starts with God creating everything, and it ends in a big bang, with a fiery end, not a fiery beginning. Interesting, isn't it? 2 Peter 3:8 also says, "But beloved, do not forget this one thing. With the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, as 1,000 years is one day." By the way, that has nothing to do with defining the word day in Genesis. It's to do with the fact the whole context is the second coming. God is not slack concerning his promises. You know, God is outside of time. To God, a day is like 1,000 years, or 1,000 years is like a day. And for this they willingly forget, willfully forget. If you look up the meaning of that word willfully, there in the Greek, choose to prefer. It is implied, as we read in the notes here, it is implied, I got different definitions here that I got from different sources, and I want to make a point here as we look at this. I looked up the Strong's Concordance, I looked up Barnes's notes, I looked up John Calvin and Jameson and Fawcett, and so wrote down what they say here, as you can see. It is implied the will was concerned in it, that they were influenced by that rather than by sober judgment and by reason. There was obstinacy. The will has usually more to do in the denial and rejection of the doctrines of the Bible than understanding has. They close their eyes so as not to see. They do not wish to know. It all fits with suppressing the truth in unrighteousness. When you look at 2 Peter 3 in different translations, translation of verse 5, willingly ignorant, willingly are ignorant of, the KJV, deliberately reject, the NIV, deliberately overlook, the ESV, they willfully forget, the New King James Version. Let's have a look at just some examples as we sort of get ready to close this out. Let's look at Richard Dawkins, who was actually on Australian television, public television in Australia, and he was in a debate with George Pell, who is an Australian cardinal from the Roman Catholic Church. And let's see what happens here.
Of course it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Of course common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Now, if you want to replace a physical explanation by an intelligent God, that's an even worse explanation.
Something mysterious happened. You can't get something from nothing. We know that. So, what about God? Oh, no. No. In fact, if you ever saw the Expelled movie, listen to Richard Dawkins' answer of how you explain life on Earth. You can't have God, and we know you can't get something from nothing, so how do you explain it?
What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto, perhaps this planet.
Of course, aliens. You can't get something from nothing. Aliens brought life to Earth. Where'd those aliens come from? I'm sure his answer would be, what are you, an idiot or something? Aliens from another planet brought life to that planet. Well, where'd they come from? Well, aliens from another planet brought life to that planet. Well, you keep going back further and further and further. Where'd the first aliens come from? Don't ask such silly questions. What about in the beginning God? No! because he doesn't want to accept that he's a sinner and in need of salvation. P.Z. Myers is a professor, associate professor of biology at University of Minnesota Morris. Ardent atheist, God hater. Listen to what he says.
Why don't you believe in God?
Why don't I believe in God? Because nobody's ever shown me the evidence for it. It's a ludicrous proposition. You know, if it were true, it would be amazing, right? It would be the most incredible thing we would ever discover in the universe, that there was some being greater than the whole of what we've been living in and studying, and he's got these vast powers. That would be earth-shaking to know about. You would think if people actually had evidence for this, they would trot it out.
Well, the evidence is all around us. The Bible makes that clear. They're without excuse. Romans 1:20, for the invisible things of him, the creation of the world, clearly seen, be understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. The DNA, for instance. I mean, even Richard Dawkins recognizes you can't get DNA from matter by random processes, so aliens planted here. See, these people, I mean, they don't want to believe. That's what the Bible says. They deliberately reject. They close their eyes. You know, where's the evidence? It's all around you. Here's...
In the God delusion,
here's Richard Dawkins again.
In the God delusion, I made a 7-point scale. 1 is I'm totally confident there is a God. 7 is I'm totally confident there is not a God. 6 is, to all intents and purposes, I'm an atheist. I live my life as though there is no God. But any scientist of any sense will not say that they positively can disprove the existence of anything. I cannot disprove the existence of the Easter Bunny, and so I'm agnostic about the Easter Bunny. It's in the same respect that I'm agnostic about God.
So, what proof, by the way, would change your mind?
That's a very difficult and interesting question, because I mean, I used to think that if somehow, you know, great big giant 900-foot high Jesus with a voice like Paul Robeson suddenly strode in and said, "I exist, here I am." But even that, I actually sometimes wonder whether that would...
Even if God's Son stepped into history on earth, he wouldn't believe it. And by the way, that's exactly what we read in the Scriptures. Consider examples of what happens when biblical figures have evidence and suppress it. You remember after Lazarus was raised from the dead? What did the Pharisees do? They plotted to kill him because the evidence of his resurrection was causing Jews to believe in Jesus. The chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death. Let's get rid of the evidence. We know he was dead and he's raised from the dead. Okay, let's get rid of the evidence. People, that's the scoffers. They don't want to believe. It's got nothing to do with the evidence. The evidence is all around us. What about the parable of the rich man who dies and finds himself in Hades and asks Abraham from across the great chasm, separating them, to send Lazarus to warn his family lest they suffer the same fate. But Abraham tells the rich man that his family has Moses and the prophets, yet they do not listen despite the evidence. And you read through there that whole account in Luke 16 and so on, and then you hear what Abraham says. If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, they're not going to be persuaded though one rose from the dead. And you know what? Think about it. Upon Christ's resurrection, the religious leaders bribed the soldiers to tell the people the disciples stole Jesus' body in order to keep his resurrection a secret. Even though one rose from the dead, let's tell people they just stole his body because they don't want to believe it. Well, and that's what you read there in Matthew 28. 2 Peter 3, they willfully forget. They choose not to believe. See, Romans 1 tells us they suppress the truth in unrighteousness because what may be known of God is manifest in them because God has shown it to them. They know. Richard Dawkins knows. P.Z. Myers knows. The Bible says the law is written on their hearts. Romans 1:20 says they are without excuse. And you know why they willfully forget? If you think about it, these scoffers, they reject creation, they reject corruption, they reject catastrophe, they reject confusion, they reject the history in the Bible, they reject consummation, because they're really rejecting Christ and the cross. Romans 1 says, professing to be wise, they become fools and change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. To me, that's just a picture of evolution. That's what it is. That's their anti-gospel, that man is the one who decides his own future and what's going to happen to him.